Minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, Mr. Concrete. Well, there's been various efforts at modeling the ability of a portfolio of clean, renewable energy technologies, wind, hydro, solar, storage, demand response, energy efficiency portfolio to not just replace Baldoon, but do so at less cost than and risks than pursuing small nuclear reactors. On the wind side of that, are you familiar with the Maritime Regional Wind Energy Resources study that was done by a couple of engineers at Renewable Energy Storage Lab in Dalhousie University?
To say that I'm specifically familiar with that one, I'm not sure. I'm familiar with a lot of different reports around wind production, but please ask your question.
Well, one of the things that so what they were looking at was how do you optimize wind in consideration of all of the grid integration metrics that the utility is concerned with. And they identified the importance of further development occurring on sort of the peripheries rather than the center of the Maritimes and of New Brunswick. So areas like the Panhandle, the mountain plateaus north of Edmundston, northwestern New Brunswick, and Restigouche area, and certainly in the mouth of the Bay of Fundy around Grand Manan and southwestern New Brunswick is meeting a lot of those metrics. And so is this, I mean, are you focused as well, like a laser beam, a second laser beam, on how to maximize the integration of wind in an effective way onto the system?
The answer would be yes. You know, all of the information that has been made available to us, a couple of factors that come into play. One is that based on technology advancements, and wind has made some good advancements, that average wind capacity factor is in that 40 to 43%. There's the odd case you might get a little higher than that, but it's in that vicinity, 40 to 43%. The other factor is wind diversity. And some jurisdictions that have, I'll say, wider geographic areas, that the wind may blow in some locations that compensates for it not blowing in other locations. Through our recent involvement with energy projects, or wind projects, I should say, certainly in northern Maine, in PEI, in New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia, we have good visibility on that wind regime. And typically what we see is that if it's not blowing in northern New Brunswick, it may be blowing a little bit in the southern part of New Brunswick, but not enough to make up the difference. So essentially what I'm saying is that even in Atlantic Canada, we're seeing that the wind regime is one wind regime that might be a couple hours, 3, 4, 5 hours delta between one area to another. But we don't have that wind diversity that says we can always count on wind blowing regardless of the conditions. And so when we look at that from our system operator point of view and from a planning point of view, we have to make sure that on those cold days of the year that we have the resources to back up and to step in when that wind is not blowing. So certainly, as I said before, we do see wind and potentially solar as being part of the solution, but based on technology that we see today, it will not solve for those cold days in the winter.
Well, and that's why I started out by framing the question up with respect to a portfolio of clean technologies that include wind, that include hydroelectricity, that include solar, that include demand response, energy efficiency, and storage. That's the portfolio taken together that addresses the concerns you're raising. But why I wanted to start off by asking about wind was because these engineers at Dalhousie specifically, one of the things they looked at was, exactly the question you were saying, and how do you optimize the location of a new wind capacity, and what they found across the Maritime, so as you can't rely on the kind of locations that have been utilized so far. You need to move to the peripheries to address that variability, like northwestern New Brunswick, like southwestern New Brunswick, like the northeastern part of Cape Breton. So anyways, that's why I asked you about the particular study. I think it's an important one, and it is the kind of research this new generation of engineers are doing, which is extremely helpful, I think. And I expect some of that's coming about because of all the efforts and activities around the clean power roadmap that the four Atlantic provinces are working on with Quebec. I understand have been a member of one of the committees, maybe the steering committee of that. The Atlantic Loop is a real focus for it. I know it was announced I think back in 2019, following a Council of Atlantic Premiers meeting, saying this would enable bringing over time 2,000 megawatts of clean renewables onto the grid in the region. We haven't seen any kind of progress report since, let's see, August 2020. So I'm wondering where that stands right now. How much longer will it be until we see the results of all of that work over the last number of years?
Yes, thank you. A couple of comments, and it speaks a little bit to your wind comment as well as hydro comment, etc. Through that effort, and I will say it was a good project, and it was a good discussion around the table of looking at all alternatives. That was wind in every jurisdiction, that was optimizing hydro, that was new hydro development potentially in Labrador with the Lower Churchill project as being kind of that next one in the region that could help to solve for the future. It looked at interconnections as well, that making sure that we optimize those. I would say one of the common denominators that came out of that report, or I should say that effort, is, and all of the regional utilities agreed, is that focusing on the transmission interconnections, such as the interface between Quebec and New Brunswick, because it is maxed out now. We're bringing in as much as we can to the region as a result of the current interconnections, as being a key ingredient or a key requirement to unlock the ability to move energy more freely around the Atlantic Canadian region. That being one of those foundational, that's where Atlantic Loop was born from, if you will, in those discussions that came out of those efforts. I'll also ask my colleague Brad if he would like to add anything else with respect to that, as he's been very much involved.
Yeah, thank you, Keith and Mr. Kuhn. The Atlantic Loop, or the Clean Power Roadmap, there was an interim report, as you indicated, released in August of last year. The parties have been working on the final report. I believe NRCan is leading the charge. Natural Resources Canada is leading the charge in compiling that final report. I know MB Power and our colleagues with the provincial government and the Department of Energy have issued our comments back on that final report. I would suggest it's going to be released any day now. I can allude to some of the conclusions were, as Keith or Mr. Cronkite indicated, interconnections do provide value, right? So that was a key takeaway. The other key takeaway is it doesn't completely solve for a net zero future. So you do need a portfolio of options. You do need to focus in on more than just the interconnections. Low carbon baseload power, such as SMRs, are exactly the type of technologies that we would need to achieve. The other key takeaway from that report was electrification will cause demands and systems to increase, as Mr. Cronkite indicated, as more things get electrified in the economy. So that shows that the value of interconnections rise, if you will, but it also shows that we need more than just interconnections to achieve that. The other key takeaway, that's the challenge, is how do you make that transition affordable? So those would be the three summary takeaways from the final report once it's issued. Thank you.
Well, it's good to hear, thank you, that it's going to be issued any day now, because it would be good to be able to inject all that work into the considerations for renewing the climate action plan in New Brunswick. A lot of important work has gone on there, a lot of research and investigation, I'm assuming modeling, so that's good. Thank you very much. My time is up. I hope we get another run at this.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kuhn. Ms.